The speech must explode into existence with a statement about the fatal mistake of announcing your plans before they're bulletproof, before they've taken root deep enough to survive the storms of doubt that other people will throw at them. This opening cannot be soft or tentative. It must immediately confront the listener with the reality that every time they've broadcast their next move to people who weren't ready to see it, they've essentially handed their enemies the blueprint to their future and wondered why those dreams never materialized. The first 3 sentences must create an atmosphere of urgency and recognition, making the listener immediately recall a moment when they shared something precious too early and watched it wither under the gaze of people who had no vision, no faith, and no business knowing what God was building in the secret place of their becoming. This isn't about paranoia or distrust. It's about understanding that revelation has timing, that there's a season for silence and a season for unveiling. And most people are losing their battles because they're revealing their strategies to opponents who are taking notes and preparing counterattacks while they're still in the dreaming phase. This section must dig deep into the specific agony of watching your announced dreams dissolve in real time, that sickening feeling when you enthusiastically share your vision with someone you thought would support you, only to see their face change, their eyes dim with doubt, and their mouth open to list 17 reasons why it won't work, why you're not qualified, why the timing is wrong, why someone else tried and failed. We explore the confusion that comes from genuinely wanting to share your excitement, your breakthroughs, your next chapter, but not understanding that every person isn't equipped to carry the weight of your unfinished vision. Some people are dream killers by nature, not because they're evil, but because they're operating from their own limitations, their own fears, their own failures, and they project those limitations onto your possibilities. Like it's wisdom when it's really just their trauma speaking. The listener must feel the weight of all those moments when they sought validation before taking action, that trap of needing people to co-sign your move before you make it, which creates a dependency on external approval that drains the very momentum you need to execute because you're spending energy defending and explaining instead of building and becoming. Here we must address the crushing rejection that comes not from strangers but from people close to you, people who knew the old version of you and can't conceive of the new version you're building. So when you reveal your next level to them, they respond with skepticism disguised as concern, doubt disguised as realism, and fear disguised as protection. This creates a unique loneliness, not the loneliness of having no one, but the loneliness of carrying a vision that no one around you can see yet, feeling isolated, even in rooms full of people, because you're living in a future they haven't accessed, building something they haven't imagined, becoming someone they don't recognize. The pain intensifies when you realize that some of your most enthusiastic dream sharers were actually your most effective dream killers. That the people you thought were your cheerleaders were actually planting seeds of doubt every time you opened your mouth about your plans. And now you're standing in the wreckage of abandoned visions, wondering if the problem was the dream or the audience you gave it to. We must also touch on that empty feeling when your announced goals attract more criticism than support, more questions than celebration, more warnings than encouragement, and you're left defending something that should have stayed protected, explaining something that should have remained mysterious until it was ready to be revealed in its finished form. This portion explores the exhausting reality of wasting precious energy, defending dreams to people who fundamentally can't comprehend them because they're not living on your frequency. They haven't received your download. They're not building what you're building. So asking them to understand is like asking a caterpillar to comprehend flight before it's ever been a butterfly. The listener must confront how much creative energy, emotional bandwidth, and spiritual fuel they've burned, trying to make people see what they see, trying to justify moves they feel in their spirit, or trying to convince skeptics who will never be convinced, because conviction doesn't come from your explanation. It comes from demonstration. We examine the trap of feeling obligated to narrate every step of your climb, to give people play-by-play updates on your progress, to prove you're actually doing something, when the truth is that real builders build in silence and let the finished product announce itself. Real warriors train in private and only fight in public. Real champions practice 10,000 hours in darkness before they step into the light for one moment of victory that everyone sees but no one witnessed being built. We transition into the lion analogy, but with fresh perspective. The young lion doesn't gather the pride to announce its intention to hunt, doesn't hold a meeting to discuss its strategy, doesn't seek approval before stalking its prey. The cub watches, learns, practices in silence, develops its instinct away from the eyes of those who would doubt its capability, and then one day it simply brings back the kill and the pride eats, without ever knowing about the 100 failed attempts, the moments of doubt, the fear that was conquered in private, This is how mastery works. It's built in the unseen hours, refined in the hidden moments, perfected when no one's watching, and only revealed when it's undeniable. The wisdom here cuts deep. Your enemies don't need to know your training regimen. Your doubters don't deserve a front row seat to your preparation. Your critics haven't earned access to your process. And the world at large will respect your results far more than your intentions. Strategic silence isn't about being secretive or paranoid. It's about understanding that there's a difference between privacy and secrecy, between being selective with your energy and being dishonest with your circle, between protecting your vision and hiding your light. And most people haven't learned where that line is. So they're either oversharing to their detriment or under-executing because they're performing their plans instead of implementing them. The seed in darkness offers another layer. It doesn't send up a press release when it's planted, doesn't announce to the surface world that it's about to become a tree, doesn't seek validation from the soil or approval from the worms. It sits in complete darkness, surrounded by pressure, covered by weight, buried alive in a sense, and it does the most important work of its entire existence without a single witness. The roots go deep before the shoot goes up. The foundation is laid in total obscurity before the visible growth begins. And when that seed finally breaks through the surface, nobody talks about the underground journey, they only see the plant. This is the pattern of all significant transformation. The most critical phase happens where no one can see it. The most important battles are fought in private. The deepest growth occurs in isolation. And by the time people notice you've changed, you've already been changing for months or years. In ways they couldn't track, building in ways they couldn't measure, becoming someone they won't recognize until the reveal is complete. The mistake most people make is trying to bring witnesses into the underground phase, trying to get people excited about roots they can't see, trying to celebrate depth that hasn't produced height yet, and then wondering why the energy dissipates before the breakthrough comes. We bring in the manufacturer and design principle with a twist. When you buy a phone, a car, a piece of furniture, you don't get to watch it being made. You don't tour the factory during production. You don't see the failures and prototypes and rejected versions. You only see the finished product that's been tested, refined, approved, and ready for market. The manufacturer doesn't owe you a behind-the-scenes documentary of every decision, every setback, every pivot. They owe you a quality product. You are the manufacturer of your own life, and the people around you are not entitled to watch your production process. They're only entitled to interact with the finished version you choose to release. Some of you have been letting people into your factory when the product isn't ready, letting critics examine your prototypes, letting doubters evaluate your rough drafts. And then you're surprised when they reject the unfinished version of what you're building. A craftsman sharpening a blade doesn't invite an audience to watch every strike of the stone. Hundreds of repetitions in solitude, the same motion over and over, the monotonous work that looks like nothing is happening until suddenly the edge is so sharp it can split a hair. That's what your silent season is producing, an edge. The forest growing in silence metaphor must be expanded. The tallest trees in the world didn't announce their daily growth, didn't broadcast their progress, didn't need cheerleaders or validation. They just kept reaching upward in complete silence, and now they tower over everything around them, and tourists travel thousands of miles just to stand in their presence. But nobody talks about the decades of silent growth that made that moment possible. We must address the critical distinction between direction and movement, because this is where most people are losing. They think talking about their goals is the same as moving toward them. They think announcing their intentions counts as progress. They think posting about their dreams is equivalent to building them. But direction is internal. It's a compass setting. It's a decision made in the quiet place of your heart. Movement is external. It's the physical steps, the daily actions, the unglamorous work that nobody celebrates until it accumulates into something undeniable. You can have all the movement in the world, running in circles, looking busy, creating the appearance of progress, but without true direction, you're just exhausting yourself for an audience. And you can have clear direction without announcing it to anyone, moving in silence with such precision and focus that by the time people notice you've moved, you're already where you intended to be. The enemy of great isn't bad, it's good. The enemy of strategic silence isn't noise, it's the good feeling you get from sharing too soon. It feels good to tell people your plans, it feels validating to get their reactions, it feels exciting to put your dreams into words and watch people respond. But that good feeling often costs you the right outcome, because you've released the energy that was supposed to fuel your execution. And now you're running on empty, trying to fulfill a vision you already celebrated before you built it. The first story enters with the image of a seed beneath concrete, buried under weight that would crush most living things, surrounded by darkness so complete that if it had eyes, it would see nothing, pressed down by forces that seem designed to keep it exactly where it is forever. But something inside that seed knows its design, knows it wasn't created to stay buried, knows the concrete above it isn't a ceiling but a challenge. And so it begins the slow work of pushing upward with no announcement, no audience, no validation from the surface world that has no idea this battle is even happening. Day after day, the seed pushes, encounters resistance, adjusts its angle, pushes again, finds the microscopic crack, applies pressure to the weakness in the concrete's armor, and keeps pressing with a patience that only nature understands. Because the seed doesn't have a timeline imposed by human anxiety, doesn't have a social media following demanding progress updates, doesn't need to prove to anyone that it's working. And then one morning, after weeks or months of invisible warfare, a tiny green shoot breaks through the concrete, and someone walking by sees it and calls it a miracle, calls it sudden, acts like it appeared overnight, completely unaware of the brutal underground campaign that made that breakthrough possible. That's your life right now. You're under pressure, in darkness, pushing against resistance that feels immovable, and you think nothing is happening because nobody can see your progress. But the concrete is cracking, the breakthrough is forming, and the day you emerge, people will call it sudden when you know it was the result of relentless pressure, applied in complete silence. The second story shifts to the image of a swordsmith in a dim forge, the blade glowing orange from the fire, and the smith begins the process of sharpening with a focus that borders on meditation, because this isn't about speed, this isn't about impressing anyone watching, this is about the edge. Strike after strike against the stone, the same angle, the same pressure, the same rhythm, and to an untrained eye it looks like nothing is changing, looks like wasted motion, looks like the smith is just going through motions without progress. But the smith knows what the observer doesn't, that every strike is removing a microscopic layer, that every pass across the stone is refining the geometry of the edge, that the transformation is happening at a scale too small to see, but too significant to skip. Hours pass. The motion continues. No music plays. No crowd gathers. No social media post announces the work in progress. Just the smith, the stone, and the blade in the darkness of the forge where real weapons are made. And then, after what seems like forever, the smith tests the edge, and it's so sharp it parts a single hair floating in the air, and anyone who witnesses that moment is amazed, calls the smith a master, wants to know the secret. But the secret was in the hundreds of hours of repetitive motion that nobody wanted to watch, the boring middle part that everyone wants to skip, the silent season where mastery was forged. Your skills right now, your character, your capacity, they're all under the stone, being sharpened in a process that looks like nothing to people who don't understand craftsmanship. But you're being refined into a weapon that will cut through obstacles others can't even dent. And the less you announce about this process, the more devastating your edge will be when you finally reveal it. The third story brings us to a real person, someone who spent years announcing every business idea to friends and family, excitedly sharing every venture before it launched, seeking input and feedback and validation from people who'd never built anything themselves, and watching in confusion as idea after idea lost momentum before it even started. The enthusiasm would drain out during the explanation. The doubt would creep in during the feedback sessions. The energy would dissipate while defending the concept to people who kept asking questions designed to find problems rather than possibilities. And this pattern, repeated, announce, explain, defend, abandon, repeat, until finally, after the seventh or eighth failure, something shifted. A new idea came, but this time, instead of broadcasting it, instead of seeking approval, instead of holding the usual focus group of skeptics, this person said nothing, disappeared into the work. Stopped posting about the journey, stopped explaining the vision. Just built in complete silence while everyone assumed nothing was happening, while old friends thought they'd given up, while family members worried they'd lost direction. 6 months of silent building, 6 months of unglamorous execution, 6 months of solving problems without announcing them, making progress without celebrating it, failing and adjusting without an audience keeping score. And then the launch happened. And the same people who'd dismissed the previous ideas, who'd planted doubt in the previous ventures, who'd asked all the discouraging questions, they were shocked. The business was real. The product was excellent. The execution was flawless. And everyone wanted to know when this happened, how this happened, why nobody knew about it. And the answer was simple. It happened because nobody knew about it. Because the energy that used to go into explanations went into execution. Because the focus that used to scatter across multiple skeptical conversations stayed concentrated on the single objective. Because silence protected what announcement had previously killed. Now we hit the exact retention hook as specified. Before I continue, answer one question honestly. How many of your dreams died in the mouths of people who weren't qualified to judge them? If you're still listening, something inside you is waking up. From here, the momentum must shift dramatically, moving from the pain of premature revelation into the power of strategic silence, from the confusion of seeking approval into the clarity of self-directed action, from the weakness of needing validation into the strength of trusting your own vision enough to protect it from voices that don't serve it, you grow in silence. You heal in silence. You rise in silence. The caterpillar doesn't announce its transformation. It seals itself away and does the uncomfortable work of complete metamorphosis, where no eye can witness the ugly middle part. And then it emerges with wings. And everyone wants to celebrate the butterfly without acknowledging that the cocoon phase was where the miracle actually happened, that the hidden season was more important than the revealed one. The cinematic build begins with a complete shift in energy and tone, moving from teaching mode into prophetic declaration mode, where the pace quickens and the rhythm becomes almost musical, almost hypnotic, like waves building towards shore with increasing intensity. You are not obligated to narrate your climb. You are not required to give play-by-play commentary on your transformation. You are not responsible for making people comfortable with your evolution. You don't owe explanations to people who weren't there during your breakdown. You don't owe updates to people who didn't invest in your building phase. You don't owe proof to people who didn't believe you when you had nothing. Some of you have been carrying the exhausting burden of trying to bring everyone along on your journey, trying to make sure nobody gets surprised by your success, trying to prepare people for your emergence. But here's what you need to understand. Your job isn't to prepare them. Your job is to prepare yourself. And their shock at your transformation is not your responsibility to manage. Let them be surprised. Let them wonder when it happened. Let them ask questions you don't feel obligated to answer. The world doesn't need your announcement, it needs your arrival. And there's a massive difference between the two that most people never learn, because they're so addicted to the validation that comes from talking about what they're going to do that they never actually do it. The rhythm intensifies as we address the listener directly with a series of declarations that build on each other, creating momentum that feels inevitable, like a train picking up speed until it becomes unstoppable. You've been moving wrong. You've been building in public when you should have been building in private. You've been seeking permission when you should have been taking territory. You've been explaining when you should have been executing. You've been defending when you should have been developing. And the beautiful thing about this moment right now, as you're hearing these words, is that you can make a different choice. Starting today, you can close your mouth and open your work ethic. You can stop posting and start producing, and you can quit performing your plans and start implementing them. You can withdraw from the audience that's been draining your energy and redirect that energy into the arena where your destiny is actually being decided. Nobody needs to know what you're building until it's built. Nobody needs to understand your strategy until it's executed. Nobody needs to believe in your vision until you've manifested it. Their belief is not a prerequisite for your success. Their belief is a response to your success, and you've had the order backwards and thinking you needed to convince them first, when the truth is you need to convince yourself through action. And once the action produces undeniable results, their conviction will follow automatically, because results require no defense. We enter into a deeper layer of identity activation, speaking directly to who they're becoming in this new paradigm of strategic silence. You are becoming someone who moves differently. You are becoming someone who operates on a frequency that most people can't track. You are becoming someone whose silence makes more noise than other people's announcements. You are becoming dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to limitation, dangerous to every lie you've believed about yourself, dangerous to the status quo that tried to keep you small. And the reason you're dangerous is because you've stopped telegraphing your punches. You've stopped giving your opponents time to prepare their defense. You've stopped broadcasting your strategy to an audience that includes people who don't want to see you win. There are people in your life right now, some of them close to you, some of them connected to you by blood or history, who are not celebrating your vision because your success exposes their excuses. Your movement highlights their stagnation. Your transformation threatens their comfort with staying the same. These people don't need to know your next move. These people don't get access to your planning sessions. These people don't deserve a seat at the table where your future is being decided, because they've already shown you through their doubt, through their questions, through their lack of support, that they're not qualified to hold the weight of where you're going. The prophetic tone escalates as we paint the picture of their future self, the person they're becoming through this practice of strategic silence. And the language becomes almost poetic, almost like we're speaking their destiny into existence with authority that comes from seeing what they can't see yet about themselves. There's a version of you that exists right now in potential, a version that doesn't need validation, doesn't seek approval, doesn't require consensus, doesn't wait for permission. That version of you wakes up every day and does the work, whether anyone's watching or not. That version of you makes decisions based on internal conviction rather than external opinion. That version of you protects your vision like it's sacred, because you understand that not everyone deserves access to holy ground. that some things must remain covered until the appointed time, that revelation has timing and wisdom knows when to speak and when to stay silent. You're becoming that person. The shift is already happening. The old you that needed to tell everyone everything, that needed to explain every decision, that needed to defend every move, that person is dying, and you might feel the grief of that death. You might feel the discomfort of operating differently than you used to. But understand that this death is making room for a resurrection, that you're shedding a skin that no longer fits, that you're outgrowing a version of yourself that was never designed to carry you to your destination. Now, we build toward the emotional peak with a series of rapid-fire truths that land like drumbeats, each one reinforcing the central message while adding new layers of meaning and application. Your silence is your strategy. Your mystery is your advantage. Your discretion is your power. When you stop announcing, you start accumulating energy, accumulating focus, accumulating momentum that isn't bleeding out through the leak of premature revelation. When you stop explaining, you start executing, actually doing the work instead of just describing the work, actually building the thing instead of just talking about building the thing. When you stop seeking validation, you start validating yourself through results, through progress, through the quiet satisfaction of knowing you're honoring your vision regardless of who understands it. And here's what happens when you operate this way. Here's what changes when you embrace strategic silence. As a lifestyle rather than just a tactic, you become unpredictable in the best way. You become someone people can't figure out, can't pin down, can't predict. And that unpredictability gives you an edge. That announcement destroys, because the moment you tell people your next move, you've given them the power to prepare for it, to block it, to undermine it, to plant doubts about it. But when you move in silence, your success is the announcement. Your results are the press release. Your transformation is the testimony. And by the time people realize what you've done, it's already done. And there's nothing they can do except respect it or reject it. But either way, you've already won. The climax intensifies with a challenge that's wrapped in encouragement, pushing the listener toward immediate application while also validating the difficulty of what's being asked. This isn't easy. Staying silent when you want to share is harder than it looks. Keeping your vision private when you're excited about it requires discipline most people don't have. Moving without announcement goes against every instinct we've developed in a culture that rewards oversharing, that celebrates constant updates, that mistakes activity for progress and posting for building. But you're not most people. If you were most people, you would have stopped listening 10 minutes ago. If you were average, you would have dismissed this message as too extreme, too cautious, too paranoid. But something in you recognizes truth when you hear it. Something in you knows you've been bleeding energy through the wound of premature revelation. Something in you is ready to try a different way because the old way wasn't working, and you're tired of announcing victories you never achieve and broadcasting dreams that never materialize. So here's your challenge. Here's what separates those who listen from those who apply. Here's what determines whether this message becomes a turning point or just another inspiring moment. You forget by tomorrow, from this day forward, you move differently. The final activation sequence begins, and the language becomes declarative, speaking with the authority of someone who's seen this transformation work countless times and knows exactly what it produces. You will build in silence. You will grow in private. You will transform without an audience. You will make moves people don't see coming. You will shock the people who thought they knew you. You will emerge from this season of strategic silence with results that require no explanation, with progress that speaks for itself, with a transformation so complete that the people who doubted you will question whether they ever really knew you at all. And they didn't. They knew the version of you that needed their approval. They knew the version of you that sought their validation. They knew the version of you that announced every plan and defended every decision. But they don't know this version. This version doesn't need their permission. This version doesn't require their understanding. This version moves with a confidence that comes from internal conviction rather than external consensus. This version of you is about to do things that the old version only talked about. And the difference between talking and doing is the difference between dreaming and living, between wishing and manifesting, between hoping and having. We close with a softer but still powerful reminder of the principle's universal application, bringing the message full circle back to the title, while expanding its meaning to encompass their entire life trajectory. Never reveal your next move. Not because you're being secretive, not because you're hiding, not because you don't trust anyone, but because your energy is precious, your vision is sacred, your transformation is holy ground, and not everyone has earned the right to witness what God is doing in you before it's finished. Let them see the fruit without knowing how the seed was planted. Let them taste the harvest without tracking the growth. Let them celebrate the arrival without narrating the journey. Your life is not a reality show that requires constant updates. Your growth is not a performance that needs an audience. Your becoming is not a spectacle that demands witnesses. It's a sacred process between you and your Creator, between you and your vision, between you and your destiny. And the less you say about it, the more power it has, the more momentum it builds, the more inevitable it becomes. The very final moment delivers the soft call to action exactly as specified, transitioning naturally from the intensity of the message to the practical next step. If this message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. And if you want more messages that grow your soul, subscribe, because your journey has just begun. The conclusion must feel like the final scene of an epic film, where everything that's been building throughout the entire speech comes together in one powerful moment of clarity and decision, where the listener feels simultaneously challenged and empowered, convicted and encouraged, called to action, but also validated in their struggle. We begin by acknowledging the weight of what's been said, recognizing that this isn't just another motivational message, but a fundamental shift in how they approach their entire life, their dreams, and their relationships with people who may not deserve access to their vision. And this shift will cost them something. It will cost them the comfort of oversharing, the temporary validation of announcing plans, the false sense of progress that comes from talking about goals instead of achieving them. But what it costs in comfort, it returns in power. What it takes in validation, it gives back in results. What it demands in discipline, it rewards in breakthrough. And that exchange is worth making, even though it feels uncomfortable, even though it goes against every instinct that social media and modern culture has trained into them. The listener needs to feel in this moment that they're standing at a crossroads, that this isn't just information but an invitation, that they can go back to their old pattern of premature revelation and predictable disappointment, or they can step into this new paradigm of strategic silence and unprecedented breakthrough. We expand on what happens in the coming days and weeks when they actually apply this principle, painting a realistic picture that includes both the difficulty and the reward, because transformation is never easy, and anyone who promises otherwise is selling a fantasy rather than preparing them for reality. In the next few days, you're going to want to tell someone about something you're building, something you're planning, something you're becoming, and you're going to feel that familiar urge to share, to explain, to seek input, to get validation. And in that moment, you'll have to make a choice: honor the old pattern or establish the new one. That moment of choice is where your future gets decided, not in some distant tomorrow when everything is easier, not in some perfect conditions when you feel fully prepared, but in that mundane Tuesday afternoon when you want to text someone your idea and you have to decide whether to hit send or stay silent. And when you choose silence, when you keep that vision to yourself, when you protect that plan from premature exposure, you're going to feel something unfamiliar. You might feel lonely because you're carrying something alone that you used to share with others. You might feel anxious because you're moving without the safety net of other people's approval. You might feel uncertain because you're trusting your own conviction without external validation to confirm it. But underneath those temporary discomforts, you'll feel something more powerful. You'll feel your energy staying contained instead of leaking out. You'll feel your focus sharpening instead of scattering. You'll feel your momentum building instead of dissipating. And that feeling is the beginning of everything changing. The conclusion must also address the relationships that will shift when they start operating this way, because strategic silence doesn't just change how they work. It changes who has access to them, who stays in their circle, who gets frustrated by their new boundaries, and who respects the mystery they're creating. Some people in your life are going to be uncomfortable with your silence, are going to ask why you're being so secretive, are going to accuse you of changing or being distant or thinking you're better than everyone, and their discomfort is actually confirmation that you're doing this right. Because the people who benefited from your oversharing, who fed off your need for validation, who positioned themselves as gatekeepers of your dreams, those people lose their power when you stop giving them access to your plans. Their discomfort is not your problem to solve. Their confusion is not your responsibility to clarify. Their frustration with your boundaries is actually their issue with losing control. And you don't owe them an explanation for why you've decided to protect what used to be public, to guard what used to be accessible, to keep sacred what used to be common knowledge. The right people, the ones who actually want to see you win, and the ones who genuinely support your growth, they won't be threatened by your silence. They won't need constant updates to believe in you. They won't require explanations to respect your journey, because they understand that real support doesn't demand access, that true encouragement doesn't need narration, that authentic relationships can exist without you, providing a detailed breakdown of every move you're making. We must paint the picture of what their life looks like 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, if they commit to this principle. If they make strategic silence not just a tactic but a lifestyle, not just a phase but a permanent shift in how they operate. Imagine yourself 1 year from today, and people are looking at you differently, treating you differently, responding to you differently. Not because you announced a transformation, but because you became one. Not because you talked about changing, but because you actually changed. Not because you posted about your goals, but because you achieved them in silence, and the results are undeniable. People are asking you how you did it, when it happened, what your secret is, and you're smiling because you know the secret was the silence itself, was the decision to stop performing and start producing, was the discipline to keep building when no one was watching, and no one was cheering, and no one believed it was even happening. You've shocked people who thought they knew your ceiling, people who had you figured out, people who wrote you off, and their shock is sweet. Not because you're vindictive, but because it confirms that you broke free from their limited expectations, that you refused to stay in the box they built for you, that you became someone they didn't predict because they never had access to the transformation happening in the hidden place. And the best part is you didn't have to defend yourself, didn't have to prove yourself, didn't have to argue or explain or justify. You just showed up different, showed up elevated, showed up transformed, and your presence was the only proof required. The emotional peak of the conclusion must feel prophetic without being religious, must feel certain without being arrogant, must feel powerful without being aggressive, speaking to the destiny that's waiting for them on the other side of this decision to operate differently. There is a future version of you that people respect without understanding, that people admire from a distance, that people talk about with a mixture of curiosity and awe, because nobody can quite figure out how you pulled it off, how you went from where you were to where you are, how you transformed so completely while staying so quiet about the process. That version of you exists right now in potential, waiting for you to step into the pattern that creates it, waiting for you to embrace the discipline that manifests it, waiting for you to honor the silence that protects it. Every day you stay silent about your plans is a day that version gets stronger. Every time you resist the urge to announce is a moment that version becomes more real. Every decision to keep your vision private is a brick in the foundation of the life that version lives. You're not hiding, you're becoming. You're not being secretive, you're being strategic. You're not isolating, you're incubating. And when the incubation is complete, when the becoming is finished, when the transformation is undeniable, you will emerge, and the world will have no choice but to make room for who you've become. The final paragraph before the call to action must tie everything together while leaving them with one last powerful image or idea that they'll remember long after the speech ends. Something that crystallizes the entire message into a single memorable moment. The lion doesn't announce the hunt. The seed doesn't broadcast the breakthrough. The sword doesn't explain the sharpening. And you don't owe anyone a preview of what you're building, a trailer of what you're becoming, a sneak peek of where you're going. Let your life be the reveal. Let your results be the announcement. Let your transformation be the testimony. Never reveal your next move, not because you're afraid of what people will say, but because you understand that some battles are won before they're fought, some victories are secured before they're announced, and some destinies are fulfilled by people who learn the power of moving in silence and letting their arrival do all the talking their announcement never could. Now go, build in silence, grow in private, transform without permission, and shock them all. If this message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. And if you want more messages that grow your soul, subscribe, because your journey has just begun.